Hello, my name is Will Jordan, and this is my fiction or nonfiction, and I will be reading from The Kremlin Conspiracy by Joel C. Rosenberg, and I'll be reading just kind of from the first chapter right here. So, Louisa Sherbatov had just turned 6, but she would never turn 7. The whirling dervish had fallen asleep on the couch just before midnight, still wearing her new magenta dress, still wearing that matching ribbon and her blonde tresses. Having finally crashed after a sugar high, snuggled up next to her mother, she looked so peaceful, so content as she hugged her favorite stuffed bear. The two lay surrounded by dolls and books and sweaters and other gifts Louisa had received from her aunts and uncles and grandparents and cousins, as well as her friends from the elementary school just down the block at the end of Grenova Street. Strewn about the room were string and tape and wads of brightly colored wrapping paper. The kitchen sink had stacked high with dirty plates and cups and silverware. The dining room table was still littered with empty bottles of wine, vodka, and scraps of leftover birthday pie, strawberry, Louisa's favorite. The flat was a mess, but the guests were gone, and honestly, her father, Fyodor, couldn't have cared less. His little girl, the only child he and Irina had able to bear after more than a decade and 4 heartbreaking miscarriages, was happy. Her friends were happy. Their families were happy. They were happy. Everything else could wait. Fyodor stared down at the 2 most precious people in his life and longed to reschedule this trip. He had loved planning the party with them both. He had loved helping shop for the food, and he loved helping Irina and her mother make all the preparations. Had loved seeing the sheer delight in Louisa's face when he'd given her shiny blue bicycle, her first. But business was business. If he was going to make his flight to Tashkent, he had to leave quickly, so he gently kissed mother and daughter on their foreheads, picked up his suitcase, and slipped out the front door as quietly as he could. He stepped out the main entrance of the apartment building, relieved to see that the cab he'd ordered waiting for him as planned. He moved briskly to the car and gave the driver his bag to put in the trunk. The night air was crisp and fresh. The moon was a tiny silver in the dark sky. Leaves were beginning to fall and swirl in the light breeze coming from the west. Summer was finally over. Fyodor thought as he climbed into the back seat, not a moment too soon. The sweltering heat, the stifling humidity, the gnawing guilt of not being able to afford to provide his family a simpler air conditioner, much less a little dacha out in the country, where he and Irina and Louisa, maybe his parents and hers, could retreat now and again. Somewhere in a forest with lots of shade and a sparkling lake to go swimming and fishing, far from traffic and pollution and frantic peace of the capital. Autumn finally. He half mumbled to himself as the driver slammed the trunk and got back behind the wheel. Growing up, Fyodor had always loved the cool weather, the shorter days, the start of school, making new friends, meeting new teachers, taking new classes. Fall meant change, and change had always been good to him. Autumn was a time of new beginnings. He wondered what this one might bring. He was not poor exactly, but he was certainly not successful. Still, he was content and even hopeful, perhaps for the first time in his life. Maybe one day, if he continued to work very hard, he could have saved enough money to move his family away from 19 Grenova Street, away from the noisy, dirty, rundown, depressing hovel on the south side of Moscow, and find some place quaint and quiet, some place where they were raising a family with a bit of grass, maybe even a garden, where he could till the soil with his own hands and grow his own vegetables. As the cab pulled away from the curb, Fyodor leaned back in the seat and folded his hands on his chest. Autumn, he smiled. He found himself reminiscing on the autumn day he first laid eyes on Irina. First day of middle school 22 years ago.